we're jumping right into it right now. So this is the newest episode of Aaron's Indie View. I don't normally introduce episodes with my name. I'm Aaron, but so after like 10 episodes, I've sort of learned things to do, how to do a podcast. But I'm speaking with my
name recognition and repeating the name
right.
recognition.
Like that's the whole. This is an ongoing problem I have with my career. Is like the whole point of doing things like this is to get your name out there, and then I don't say my name. I'm like, hi, I'm a guy that makes comics. Goodbye. And then like, oh, who was that? I don't know.
Aaron, Mr. Aaron Walther. Gonna say it.
Yeah, say it like 5 more times, please.
Mr. Aaron Walther. What the things you say are hitting so close to home. I think I might cry.
Yeah, I know, right? So
do you think that's maybe a subtle self-destructive streak that you and I and a bunch of other indie guys have?
No. Also, you're not allowed to ask questions. It's my podcast.
Yes, sir.
So I'm kidding, of course.
I sit chastened and rebuked.
I am speaking to my good friend Gabriel Dunston. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah. I mean,
of course I did.
It's not that hard.
It's not that hard. Well, I mean, I could have said Gabriel Dunston.
Yeah, like every first day of school and every substitute teacher I ever had. Middle school was great. It's a lot of fun. Well, I could always spot the telemarketers because I would have to answer with, if it's a 1L, it's a boy's name.
Mm-hmm.
And then the good ones will correct themselves.
Yeah. I have a similar thing. I can always tell when somebody doesn't know me because they'll pronounce my last name without the H. They're like, there's an instinct to say Walter.
Yeah.
But no, it's with the H, Walther, like James Bond's gun.
My brother is named Adrian. He married a woman named Jamie. So their answering machine for the first several years was, hi, you've reached the home of Adrian and Jamie. If you know which one of us is male and which one of us is female, leave a message.
That's pretty good. But as I say, I'm going to keep you on track today. So we're going to start this podcast. I got a list of things I want to talk to you about.
Oh, snap. All right.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to talk to you about number one, just your origin, your comic book creating origin.
Mm-hmm.
I would also like to talk about your book, Purgatory Pub, which we're just going to get this out front right away. I am totally repping Purgatory Pub right now.
You still have the shirt?
I still got my shirt.
Only like 10 of those were made.
Hey, I got it.
So, I need to make more. That's so... Oh, man. Oh, I love you so much, Aaron.
And we're going to talk about your new YouTube channel. I hesitate. I shouldn't say new YouTube channel. We're going to talk about your YouTube channel. I'll edit that out.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
And we're also, time permitting, we're going to talk about the Venture Brothers.
Yeah.
Because it's a mutual...
borderline obsession
for both of us. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's something that we're just going to get that right out front. Little list of things we're going to talk about, and let's just jump right into it. So, Gabe, you and I have known each other for several years. You actually were one of the earliest artists that I've worked with, not the first, but you responded to an ad that I put out for my first graphic novel, Zero's Heroes, and you did a backup 2-page story for that.
Yeah. Similarly, you were not my first, but one of my earliest clients when I tried actually making comics for money and for a page rate.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Your comic company's logo was on my portfolio site as like people I've worked with.
Oh, well, I'm very sorry to disappoint you that company no longer is in existence.
I'm very sorry to disappoint you, but all of the companies that I had on my website are no longer in existence.
Yeah.
And to disappoint you further, it held no sway on any client whatsoever.
That doesn't surprise me, but we'll get to that. Let's talk first just about, I want to know more about Gabe, the artist. How did you get into doing art? How did you get into drawing? Like, is it just something that you've always been into, and then at some point you were like, comic books, that's a good idea, and you were young and naive and didn't know better, so you pursued that? Is that...
no, you're not far off. Like I just the latest books that I finished were actually kids books. They're like quasi kids books, comics. They're they're in the zone. Like it's short, but panel after panel. And I digress. I did a reading at a school recently, and the kids asked me the same question: how long have you been drawing? When did you start? Y'all, in North America and most of the Western world, it's the same for everybody. When we're in kindergarten, we get our hands on paper and crayons. Like everybody, it's part of human development to do some kind of mark making. Like this is holding a crayon in a fist. That's what that is. I'm not angry at you. So that is how I got my start. The thing that separates the artist from everybody else is around middle school, high school, I didn't stop. And and I couldn't, because I'm a pretty enthusiastic person about the things that I like. I want to know all the stuff. And comics and art were so cool and interesting, I couldn't not participate. It's like, it's so amazing, I have to try this. So and comics was definitely there for me. Like I'm the youngest of 5 kids. When I was a little boy, that's when the 90s comics were happening. So like all the guys who founded Image, so you know, your McFarlane, your Liefeld, the guy who does Savage Dragon,
Eric Larson, Mark Silvestri,
Larson, Silvestri, Valentino. When I was in high school, Silvestri had started Top Cow, which was kind of a big deal. So like, just being the youngest, I was exposed to a lot of things that my peers weren't. Things like Star Wars. I was born and grew up in the period in between old and new Star Wars. So
you and I are the same on that. Like, I remember it's such a weird thing to talk about. Like the weird space you're in, because there's like the old people that were like, I know a guy who saw the first Star Wars movie, like, no joke, like 17 times in theaters, because that's just the way it was back then. And if you were into it, and if you were like, people got obsessed with that movie, and this was before VHS was like a thing, so you just went and saw it.
Before Betamax.
Right. And I was like way into Star Wars, but it was in that in-between period in the 90s when it was the tapes had kind of been out, and everybody was ignoring all that Ewok stuff that had happened in the 80s. And this was before the prequel, well, way before the prequels, but even before the special editions. There was a lot of hype building up to those special editions. And I was that age.
Kenner started making the toys.
And all the new generation of toys, which I'll give them credit. Some executive, some guy in a suit that worked for a company was like, you know what worked really well for Star Wars in the 70s? Making toys. Let's do that again. And it worked really well in the 90s.
Let's do that again, except let's do a better job. Let's
exactly. Because the toys
redesign, let's use different materials. Let's hire actual sculptors.
Right. God, I had so many of those toys.
So in my theme of just every nerd thing that I thought was so cool, getting super into it, I became so obsessed with Star Wars. And then when the toys started coming out again with toy collecting, to the point that it was extremely unhealthy. Like it was a problem. I really hurt myself. And I had so much Star Wars crap, some of which I still have, because I like, as just an artist and somebody who appreciates design, like the Millennium Falcon, they didn't change the design from the original because they nailed it. Like as an art object, the Millennium Falcon toy is still amazing. So of course I'm keeping it. The TIE Fighter is such an incredible design. Of course I'm going to keep that around. But I had shelves and shelves and shelves and shelves of the full-sized figures and all of their ships and stuff. So youngest, lots of brothers, exposed to a bunch of stuff that none of my peers were, which like I'm already set apart because the youngest in a big family is never okay. And
I was gonna say, just real quick up front, that is an interesting dynamic about the difference between the two of us, because you're the youngest in a big family and I'm the oldest in a big family. But in a weird way, it's almost like our families are like,
who is also never quite okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
there's a difference.
Just like the oldest, God bless you.
Well, that's
the oldest is where the parents make all the mistakes.
Right. That's where they experiment with like parenting, and then they get all the kinks worked out. And by the time they get to the youngest, they don't care anymore. The middle child is the one who gets like the sweet spot of the parenting, and then the youngest one, they're just like, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah, but then you've got the curse of the middle child is being the forever peacemaker, and like you get the parents with experience and still with some energy, but you don't get the attention.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Oh, it's fascinating. We could do a whole hour-long podcast just
we
on
sure could.
Family dynamics. And maybe we'll do that as a special episode, but not right now.
Yeah.
I want to keep talking about Star Wars. No, wait. I want to keep talking about you and your interest in drawing comics.
So comics is one of the many nerd obsessions that I followed, but it's also been the most persistent, because while I always loved comics and I always read them since before I could read, I would beg one of my brothers to read Spider-Man to me, which, God bless him, the middle brother, he did.
Oh,
yeah,
so it's his fault.
On more than one occasion.
We can place the blame on him.
And he would read with voices, God bless him.
Oh,
yeah.
That's too nice.
Yeah. So when you're the youngest in a big family, the word you hear the most is shut up.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, could you shut up? So in that environment, I had a brother who sat down on the floor, opened up my comics, and pointed and read and did voices.
Wow.
So middle school, high school rolls around. I'm getting involved in every bit of nerdery I can, reading Star Wars novels, drawing character designs for D&D, reading comics, involved in theater, exploring a nascent ability in music. And that same brother bought me a copy of Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud.
Oh, required reading for people that want to get into 100%. The medium of comic books.
And you know what? Furthermore, I would argue, if you're interested in film, understanding comics and making comics, huge, because the parallels are amazing. I'll get into that later. But he gave me that, and I read it, and just I was at that perfect nerd age in high school where the certain whatever interests you're in like kind of settle and galvanize themselves. And so music wise, I was introduced to Rush and prog rock and prog metal. And up to that point, I started playing drums, and I was just, holding my sticks like a caveman and hitting things. And then I started listening to Rush and prog, and it's just like, oh, you could take this really seriously. There's depth, there's artistry, there's like, you could really sink your teeth into this and spend your entire life studying and making this and making it interesting. And so, yeah. At the time that I was having this epiphanal awakening about music, I had the same awakening about comics and visual storytelling, because like everyone else on God's green earth, I mean, who doesn't love movies? And but unlike most of my peers, like I got the same stuff from a good comic book. Like if I would come home from the comic shop having dropped all of my meager dollars on whatever bit of paper that I could, go to my room, like just based on the cover and flipping through, I think I should listen to this album while I'm reading this, and just turn everything off, have that album and read. And it was amazing. And I would be just such a nerd about it, read it once just to read it, and then immediately turn it back over and start over and say, establishing shot, tight shot here, he moved the camera that way, yada yada.
Yeah, totally.
And so after I read Understanding Comics and I started rereading the other comics, and I started being introduced to things like The Watchmen. Like this was around 16 years old, which I think is a great age to read The Watchmen. To have it really affect you.
I agree. That might actually be the optimal age.
Exactly. The optimal age is not freaking 30.
Yeah, because it's the age where like you're prepared to read something a little more beyond like kiddie stuff, but you're still influential, or what's the word I'm looking for? you're still inexperienced enough.
Hell, you're malleable.
Malleable, yeah, exactly. So like you haven't experienced a whole lot, so it like to an inexperienced reader, Watchmen will blow your mind.
Yeah,
but it's. I always hate to say this because it sounds so unfair to Watchmen, but like if you're just like a regular reader of comics now in your 40s, anything you read is going to feel anything. If you just like haven't read Watchmen before and you go back to read it, it's going to feel so passé. But it's the same, like it's the Orson Welles Citizen Kane problem. You do not understand that what he was doing in that movie was literally inventing the things that are so normal and commonplace in every movie since then.
And I tell you, I am that dirtbag because I watched Citizen Kane as somebody who's over 30.
Yeah.
I
suspect you were also somewhere past the year 1930-ish,
I will stand on both of my feet and say Casablanca is an infinitely better movie, and I will die on that hill.
Okay.
And part of it is because Citizen Kane is are we cursing on here?
Yeah, you're free to do whatever you want.
Okay.
YouTube says it's not for kids, so I say go all out.
On my channel, which is not for kids, but I teach a lot of kids, so they go on there. On my channel, I have a strict no cursing policy.
Well, that's fair.
Since I'm here, Citizen Kane is a shitty movie about a shitty guy being shitty for his whole shitty life, and it was made by a shitty guy who was shitty for his whole shitty life. Orson Welles is not a good dude, and I won't go into it here, but
we're just gonna leave that there because I don't actually have any ability to defend that, but it still makes me unhappy.
Yeah, well, no, to summarize, he's one of those guys where truth and sincerity aren't things. What's a good story? What charms you now? And what is something that an audience wants to hear? And that's who he is. And when it comes to like interpersonal relationships, his marriages, his children, and they're like it's a lot of women. He had daughters. It's a lot of women who felt left behind, and they 100% were, because that wasn't cool or interesting, and an audience didn't care about that.
Yeah, that's a unfortunately recurring archetype for a lot of those types of people, like really artistically driven, but they're also just totally their personal life is just a mess.
And conversely, one of the greatest heroes in comics, who I would argue is a great American hero, Jack Kirby, in an interview with his son, who is either the third or fourth child, like written as somebody who was in his 60s. His son said, everybody asked me what it's like to have Jack Kirby for a dad. It was awesome. Dad was home all the time. The rule was, if it was afternoon and he's in the basement working, we could go down anytime to ask him for something or say hi. And the rule was, if we ask him, pencil down, what can I do for you? And like Susan Storm of the Fantastic Four is named for his oldest daughter, Susan. Like all of his daughters have superheroes.
Yeah, all of his kids, like they all like weed their way into the comic books. And no, Jack Kirby is great, and we could do a whole hour talking about how amazing Jack Kirby was.
I just bought his biography. I read it in the store 2 different times because I couldn't afford it, but I bought it from a used bookstore, so now I can read it.
Right honestly.
Like all of my art heroes, like that's Orson Welles, and people like him disappoint me because all of my art heroes who worked in comics, it's like, no, they wanted to have families and whatnot. So
well, I want to talk about that actually. Let's I'm keeping this thing on track. One of your earliest, is it one of your earliest comics? My question is, I know you did that comic that was like an homage to Kirby, and you recently put it on your website. I had read it before, and I can't remember the context that I had read it. I don't know if it was in a printed book that you'd done, because I do have a few other books of yours.
I think that when I emailed, like you were looking for artists, and I emailed you and I said, my name is Gabe, here's what my stuff looks like, it was probably in a link.
Okay, yeah, that's possible.
Just to prove I can put a panel after the other.
So just for clarification for listeners, would you briefly explain what that story is? What was it called?
Oh, sure. The story was called Off-Panel Hero. You can read it on my website right now, coffeeandhate.biz. I read the Jack Kirby biography and read how he had been screwed over and over and over again by Marvel and DC.
And then Marvel again.
And then Marvel again. And it just broke my heart and made me so sad. And like, there was a lot of influential people who knew and loved him, but not so influential that they could move a publishing company.
Right.
So I wrote essentially a bit of wish fulfillment. It's like, okay, so let's take a couple of names that are real. Let's take a couple of real names and rearrange them. And then let's make one or two people up. And let's just some wish fulfillment. Let's write somebody who is Kirby, but isn't Kirby, who does all the things that Kirby did. And through clandestine Robin Hood measures, a close friend gets him what he deserves. Because like in the actual Jack Kirby story, he finally quit comics. Like the quote attributed to the man who revolutionized an entire art form. He says, "Comics will break your heart, kid."
Yeah.
And I read that when I was a teenager, and I decided I wanted to make comics. And the king says, "Comics will break your heart." And I'm like, nah, not me. I'm totally gonna do it.
Isn't that just like the perfect picture of the comic book industry?
Yes.
Like the king of the industry is like, don't do it, and all the young artists are like, I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna do it because we can't help ourselves. Because when you're in love, you're in love, and even if it's an abusive relationship, man, you can't tell your heart to turn off. But I digress. In real life, Jack Kirby finally quit all of comics and got into an animation studio, making things like the Batman cartoon in the 70s.
He did a lot of character designs for what was that show? I've already forgotten it now. Steve Garber did some creation work for it. It's really bothering me. It was in the early 80s when it came out.
Okay, so not Super Friends?
Not Super Friends, no. I think, he did work on that with Alex Toth.
There was the Spider-Man show. The X-Men had their own series.
Oh, man. I know this, too. It's how embarrassing. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But anyway,
I'm not going to make you turn in your nerd card.
It's like it's a post-apocalyptic cartoon. It only ran one season. And it had it was like He-Man in Mad Max type of thing. Like He-Man, like Space He-Man in Mad Max with like a Wookiee.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was actually pretty awesome. It like I said, it only did one season. It was early 80s animation, so take that for what it's worth. But it's like, he did a lot of the character designs for that. And Steve Garber, also a famously maligned comic book creator. Steve Garber was a creator of Howard the Duck, who worked for Marvel in the 70s and then quit in disgust because they sucked, and he moved into animation, and the rest is history.
Kirby moved into animation for two reasons. One, paycheck, child of the Depression until the day he died, and two, health insurance. It was he got the job in animation when he turned 60 thereabouts. And it was the first time in his life that he had access to actual medical care outside of the army, and he got that job just in time for his first heart attack. Exactly. So the story I wrote, the inciting incident is the Kirby character has his first heart attack, and there's no net. He's boned. Because that's what would have happened to the man himself. Doesn't matter what he did for any of the companies. Doesn't matter that he had 4 kids. Doesn't matter that he was a sole breadwinner. Doesn't matter that he pulled 2 companies out of the fire on 2 different occasions, all by himself. Nope. You have the heart attack. You can't draw anymore. You're boned. That's it. We're done with you. So that's the inciting incident of my little story.
Well, I like that short story.
I appreciate you know what? I like it too. I reread it recently, and it checks all my boxes. Like if I was on Comic-Con floor and I just spotted it, I'd be like, I want this book.
Yeah, I liked it. I like you said, it's like a wish fulfillment story, and maybe just me being the comic book industry person that I am, like having knowledge of the industry and specifically being a big fan of Jack Kirby and knowing the history, it certainly pushed a lot of emotional buttons for me where I'm just like, yeah, it's wish fulfillment, but it's what I really, really wish would have happened.
And unlike so much wish fulfillment, like a Tarantino movie, it's not 3 hours of watching your wish be fulfilled over and over again. It's a story. It's like, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, it's worse, it's worse, it's worse, it's all better.
Yeah.
So moving this way back. So like 16 years old, the perfect time to read The Watchmen, because it is mind blowing. And all of the things that you think is so gritty and real, you're allowed to think that as an adolescent. And if you read it as an adult and have the same reaction, there's something wrong.
That's a good way to put it.
So between like the watch, that was also the same year that the Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire came out.
That you read Watchmen?
Yeah.
Okay.
This was the year that I got Understanding Comics. It was the year that I started playing in my first metal band. It was the year that I read Understanding Comics, that I read The Watchmen.
So this was a big year for you, huh?
It was a super big year for me.
2002?
2002.
Yeah, 2002.
2002.
I remember going to the first showing of the Spider-Man movie with Tobey Maguire. And I had a little Spider-Man toy in my pocket.
And it coincided with the very first free comic day. So
that was.
So me and my nerd buddies, one of them had a girlfriend who could drive, and God bless her, she drove us to the flea market and to 2 different comic shops and to the movie, and we all got dinner after, and it was a great day for.
I was gonna say
she wasn't a huge comics fan, but she seemed to have a good time. It was a fun movie.
She was just glad that you were glad.
I guess
or maybe it was a prediction of things to come.
Kind of. It's also like, if you're not into nerd culture, but you're an open person, it's interesting anthropologically. Like she really enjoyed coming into the Now, I hasten to add, I'm of the generation where girls who are into comics and D&D and Star Wars and stuff, that's not weird or new. Like ours is the generation where it's girls were always there. This particular young lady had never been to a comic shop.
I'm the same way. I still kind of fall into the I don't want to become like an embarrassing meme, but I'm still like the I used to get beat up for reading comic books, and now it's like all anybody at work talks about.
Oh, I know. Like, and how jarring is that?
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I wish somebody would talk to me. I'm sorry, I got a cat in my lap.
You're good.
I can't tell you how many times I wish somebody would want to talk to me about Spider-Man. And now I'm just like, I can't hear this anymore. I don't care about it.
I know. When I tell people I haven't seen X, Y, or Z Marvel movie, they're like, why not? It's like, because I can tell you who wrote and drew the original issue.
Right.
It's because I've been all right. So what I was getting at,
we're dating ourselves a little bit here.
No, it's cool. Hey, y'all, I was a sophomore in high school in 2002. The Watchmen came out in 1986. That's when I was born. I'm 35. That's where I'm at. I've been married for 14 years. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I'm not necessarily Captain Youngface anymore.
Well, I'm a little older than you, but I don't have quite as many accomplishments. So.
They're not accomplishments, man. They're strokes of luck.
Well,
like I was telling somebody today, somebody says, "Oh, you're doing such a good job with your daughter." I didn't do any of that shit. She came out of the womb a freaking angel,
fully formed.
Yeah, and my wife is just a badass who doesn't need to blink. You know what I mean? So I lucked out.
So let's. I'm gonna stop you right there. I'm steering this ship. We're gonna keep going. You did that. When did you do that Jack Kirby comic? Like what in relation to like what you were doing at the time? I know. I'm sure that wasn't like your first comic you made.
No. Across high school, I kept coming up with different concepts and making, like most teenagers, instead of actually drawing the comic, which is putting panel after a panel, which is insanely difficult if you've never done it before.
Yeah.
It's all pin-up drawings and character designs and anatomy studies and figure drawing and working on my perspective. And then, senior year of high school, I started actually trying to make comics panel after panel and just realizing how insanely more difficult that is than just drawing single images. Like when I listen, I recently started, I joined the Society of Children's Book Writer and Illustrators, and I hung out with a bunch of kids books people, and listening to those illustrators talk about how hard, it's so awful. Meanwhile, I got lucky. I was there with one of my indie comics buddies. And every time somebody would mention about how hard it is to illustrate these books, we'd both just kind of,
yeah, you do like 20 images for a book.
Yeah,
like that's like
because like both of us,
3 pages of a dense comic book.
Both of us are looking at these people like this thing that took you all year. I made 3 of these last year, and I was dragging ass. But I digress. I would come up with a concept and make maybe 1 or 2 pages about it, and then I'd get bored. And a new concept and 1 page, and then I'd get bored. And then the other cool thing that happened was the earliest days of webcomics. My dad worked at IBM. My brother's a super tech guy. As soon as webcomics were a thing, I was reading them. Yeah. And for us, like, that was the promised land.
Sure.
And what doesn't exist anymore, and what people forget, is the earliest webcomics were not copies of the newspaper comic strips.
Right.
They were comic book guys putting their books on the internet, 1 issue at a time. And the issues were much more fluid, like 10 pages instead of 22, or 6 pages this time, or a full 32-page short this time. And they lived and died very quickly and disappeared. When people are like, once it's on the internet, it's there forever. No, the fuck it's not. Because
that's true. There were so many popular webcomics that were like really long. What now I think from a traditional comic book standpoint, you would look at them as like a long series, like hundreds of issues, but they were just somebody making their epic story. A lot of it was influenced by anime and manga, and it's just everything. It was a
remarkable amount of Sonic the Hedgehog comics.
A remarkable amount,
like not even the weird ones. I saw a panel discussion with not Tracy Yardley, but somebody else who did Sonic for a bunch of years. He said, I was so happy to know that, get on the internet and see how many people really loved Sonic. And then I kept seeing how many people really loved Sonic. And then I got some images on my computer that I'm pretty sure the FBI have me on a watch list about. Anyway, I don't search Sonic comics anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, and I mean, like, legitimately, I read a Jay and Silent Bob comic, like unlicensed. Somebody just made it and put it on the internet, and it was 22 pages, and it was glorious. It was well drawn, and for the high school kid that I was, it was funny as hell. I can't remember any of the jokes. I bet if I read it now, it'd just be god awful. But for a 16, 17-year-old boy, I'm like, snoogans.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the question was, when did I actually make Off Panel Hero? So
get me to Purgatory Pub.
Get you to Purgatory. Okay.
Yeah.
Fast forward. I'm in college. I have to make a lot of decisions. I meet this woman. We fall in love. We get married. I got married when I was 21. I knew it was young at the time. The older I get, the more I'm like, jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she and I got together. I'm getting there. I promise.
We're getting there. I know.
She and I get together, we discuss our dreams and whatnot and how we want our lives to go. And at that time, it was either I'm going to be a musician of some stripe and probably be a faculty position. It's called assistant band director. That's the drum guy. That's the guy who takes care of the drumline kids and the percussion ensemble. That was route number 1. Route number 2 was work from home, making comics. And I was already making journal comics and posting them on the regular, and those were the first ones to get consistent laughs because, pro tip, those were the first ones where I wasn't trying so hard to be funny. It's just like, no, this funny thing happened, I'm going to represent it as accurately as I can without trying too hard.
And also, like, you were just doing it, just like putting it out there,
just do it, just put it out, quit thinking so hard, quit making all of these huge outlines of story arcs and where your characters are going to go and how it's all fun and games and then shit gets real, which was a super trend at the time. And just after we got married and we made some decisions and we made some life plans, comics. It's going to be comics. I'll teach drumline after school. And so I started making comics, and I started making journal comics in earnest. So instead of strips, I'd make full pages. And I treated it as kind of my grad school, because I finished up a degree and 2 minors. And it's just, I have to draw from life every day. Bless her, she bought me a digital camera, which was an expensive gift at the time. And I was taking reference photos for every single comic. So I'm drawing from life every day. I'm finishing 1 and 2 and 3 page short stories. And that goes on for a couple of years. And what I didn't realize when I started, but what happened is I documented our first years as a couple. And I documented the year that my daughter was born. And her first year of life. So now I have this family document. Hey, daughter of mine, this is what mom and dad were like before you were around. And that was really sweet. And I got so freaking sick of drawing my own stupid face and my degree was in writing. And I got so freaking sick of just interpreting a thing that had happened that week. And I had all of these stories that I had piloted out. So I just, Purgatory Pub came from kind of the same place that Off-Panel Hero did. I have to sit down. I have to write some fiction. I wrote it. I'm digressing on my webcomic website and just going to tell my audience, look, I made a thing. You don't have to like it, but that's what's happening for the next couple of weeks. And I'll be back to the regular stuff later. So I made Purgatory Pub, a mini comic, 20-page short.
Okay.
I made Off-Panel Hero, and I made a story. Like, I had to put my childhood dog down. So I wrote just the life of this dog. And so I had book 1, my first year of journal comics, on my table because I started going to conventions. And I had stapled mini comics, Off-Panel Hero, Purgatory Pub, and Penny, which was my dog's name. And consistently, the cover of Purgatory Pub is an angel and a devil sitting in a bar, arm in arm, raising a glass and smiling.
Right. And
consistently, people kept picking that up and kept laughing at it and kept flipping and thought it was just amazing. So the short story is just an angel and a devil walk into a bar. They're friends, and they just talk after work every day. It's the angel from your shoulder and a devil from your shoulder, and they're not on the same guy. They're talking shop. And the angel is definitely righteous, and the devil is definitely kind of a bad guy. But they like defense and prosecutors, they know the job. They know the game. Right. They're not, they can be opposed, but they know the game, and they're not going to fight each other on that. And they hang out in the bar. So the devil character is essentially stand-in for all the shitty atheists I ever knew. Like, not all of the atheists, I know the shitty ones.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. And the angel was the stand-in for all the good believers that I knew, and I was fortunate enough to know a lot of them. And so it's a lot of them arguing about how God isn't real, God is a delusion, and twist, the bartender is God. Ha 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 ha. That was the whole mini comic. And it came from, like, I grew up Catholic in this area, and most people, like, it's like I grew up Catholic, so for
I've known plenty of people like that.
And me too. And most of them come from up north, and most of them can draw it back to either Italian or Irish.
Right.
We're Catholic because my mom is Argentine, and Hispanic Catholic comes from a very different place. And in addition to those two things, like, here in the American South, this is Southern Baptist country. Southern Baptists don't like you when you're Catholic, and some of them really don't like you. They'll fucking let you know, and they'll quote scripture real good to let you know, and it was super painful and hurtful. And because my church life at the time, when you're growing up in that environment, you're not going to church out of an obligation. You're going because you're a true believer. So I was there with a bunch of true believers who were really, really good about Jesus was real clear. Judging people is not your job. Ta-da. Your whole job is to be loving to everyone around you. The question that you're supposed to ask is how? What's the best way to do that? Very nurturing environment. all of the priests that I went to church with, just imagine Mr. Rogers. I had 3 different versions of Mr. Rogers from an early age who were really, really good. One of my oldest family friends is a nun, salt of the earth. I never saw her without a baby in her arms because she was constantly fostering orphan babies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and also like just where I was raised, Christianity is a thing you do. It's not a brand name. It's not a shirt you're putting on. You don't just wave your magic wand and say, I'm a Christian, which means everything's right. It's like, no, it's a discipline. This is something you do. You have to be doing it. And I grew up around people who were, and that was lovely. And then I went to school with people who didn't and told me that I was doing it wrong, forcefully, frequently, and cruelly sometimes.
But it's that combination of awkward age and awkward environment where you're going to have a lot of extremes on all sides, and people that are what's the word, lack of a nuanced or experienced perspective of the whole thing.
Lack of nuance. Southern Baptist is a super Calvinist fundamentalist interpretation, and it's not good and it's not healthy. And if it's all you've got, and if it's really holding all of your shit together, then good for you and God bless. But if you can get some nuance in you, for God's sakes, do it. So and it's so many earnest kids who are trying to do good and really think that they're gonna save my soul,
right?
And those were the worst.
I mean, that's always the trickiest thing about the whole thing. C.S. Lewis has like that great quote about I'm embarrassed because I can't even remember the quote, but it's like the authoritarian the authoritarian who believes that they're oppressing you out of their own moral superiority is worse than just like somebody who's just like a big sadist, because the sadist will eventually be satisfied or get bored or whatever, whereas the moral authoritarian
isn't lying about who they are, and it's not lying about what they're doing, not to themselves or anybody else.
Whereas like the moral authoritarian will consistently be on you because they feel like it's their righteous duty to consistently be doing whatever they're doing. Okay, so
backpedaling.
Purgatory Pub.
It's a mini comic. It does extremely well.
Right.
Where I was in my head and in my life, and I'm also the nerd who 100% reads. Like being Catholic means that you've got all of this old philosophy stuff that's still relevant, still worth reading, and is not thought of as heresy. Like if I try to bring up St. Augustine or St. Thomas Aquinas or freaking Isaac Newton. You know, just bring up these thinkers, and when they start waxing philosophical, Tolstoy, for instance, dropped so many philosophical bombs about art and religion and the nature of faith and weaving between them. So I'm the nerd who's reading all of those and super into it, and I'm surrounded by a lot of people who think that it's all garbage, some for good reasons, some for very silly reasons. So I have a lot more to say, and apparently people are interested. So I sat down and wrote these 2 characters writ large, plus some characters that they mention, just all the ideas that I have. I wrote it all out in 2013. And I had it in my head that I was going to, make that comic in a year. It's how many years later? It's 8 years later. And I finished book 3, last year, and I've just started on book 4, the last one. It's turned into a 4-book series that has taken 8 years and will probably be 9.5 before book 4 is printed in my hands.
That's the comic book life. Am I right? That's why they tell you whenever you talk to somebody who's like made a comic book before, and like, what advice do you have for a young comic book creator that wants to get in on the action? The first thing they say is, just do a short 10-page story. Don't do a 100-issue epic.
Don't do 10 pages.
Don't even do that.
Do one.
Do a 1-page story. Yeah.
And like this is the most embarrassing and humiliating part of all of this is I did that. My journal comics were 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages, sometimes just a strip. And then I dipped my toe. All right, I'm going to make a 10-page no, it was like an 18-page thing about my dog.
Mm-hmm.
I did a 32-page thing about Jack Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
I did a 20-page thing with these Angel and Devil characters.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a graphic novel the way I always said I was going to. And holy God, it's been 8 years.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I've made other stuff. Like I've been a freelance illustrator. I wrote some flavor text for, like I worked on some board games as an illustrator. I wrote some flavor text for some of those. I've written some short stories and put them in places. I've made some kids books. But this, as far as comics goes, up until the pandemic, it's just been Purgatory Pub and just cranking it.
Yeah. I feel you. Do you feel a lot of almost like a resentment at the pressure to just finish this thing that you started, and does that not allow you to enjoy other things, or like even entertaining other ideas? Because I know it's really easy to get distracted of like, oh, I should do this, I should do that, but I got this albatross on my neck that I got to finish.
The albatross around my neck is exactly what I've been calling this series for about 5 years.
Yeah.
So halfway through book 2, I realized my mistake. Because halfway through book 2, I take a break and make my first kids book. And then I finish book 2 and make my second kids book. And then I'm like, if I had any sense at all, I would drop this Purgatory Pub nonsense. Just make kids books, because I can put more than one of these out every year. They've got better appeal. And there's a chance somebody might want to publish one of these, which, fun fact, no, there's not. There's no chance. Nobody wants to publish anything that I've made.
The kids picture books, the kids illustrated novels, that's a whole different industry than the comic book industry. And it's probably worse than the comic book industry in many ways, certainly in ability to break in,
Well, I tell you what, I was very spoiled very early on by, religious talk aside, just in terms of being yourself and going through the world.
Yeah. If you just do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, and you can just live like happy forever.
But like interpersonally, being around metalheads, like it's, if you're not talking religion, everything's fair game. And after trying so hard to get into kids publishing or anything else, it's just like, no, fuck this. I'm going back to comics. I'm going back to comics. I'm going back to my metalheads. I'm going back to these unpretentious people who are just happy, who are happy to be there, happy to spread the love, and 100% have the attitude of, I'm doing my thing, and the thing that you're doing doesn't affect me. I'm doing my thing. If you're doing something I like, then we'll high five and I'll buy your book and shit. And if you're doing something I don't like, I don't have to talk about it, and I don't have to see it, and I don't have to deal with it. And that's very much an attitude shared by people who make indie comics. Now, people who read or do criticism, or people who do the pinups and writers and commentators and whatnot, different story. There's a lot more I'm worried about everything you're doing. There's a lot more of that, or this is good art, that is bad art, yada yada yada. Meanwhile, the people who are actually making the comics, the large, the small, and the good and the super bad, just god awful, doesn't matter. Because if you're moving your pencil, A, you're a member of the club, and B, if I don't like you, your stuff, your statement, any of that, I am so busy making my own thing that I don't have the bandwidth for you and your thing that I don't like.
I think that's what a lot of it is, like creators, like you said, they just don't have the time to like worry about all the externalities, and it's just, and there's also that like that internal identity of like, well, I view myself as a creator, I respect that you're a creator, because there's like a lot of people that whose the work they do I don't personally care about, but I'm happy that they found an audience. And I think we would all kind of like to think about it in those terms of like, we don't all have to be doing, we don't all have to be doing the things that I specifically think should be done, but I'm happy that you are able to find people that like what you do, because at the end of the day, I think we all kind of approach it as artists of like if you want to get like into like pure what is art talk, at the end of the day, it's like we can talk about what do market trends show, and what's popular and what do you want, blah blah blah, but we all would like to just view ourselves as just doing our thing and being able to be popular without having to compromise our integrity.
And popular is such a relative term.
Exactly.
It's really just like, if I'm selling enough books to pay my bills, I'm John Grisham and I'm fine. And
right. So there's there I think in the community, I mean, you're going to run into egos. That's a thing, and you're going to see people
which
that
is
are like,
just, where do those even come from, dude? You're making fucking comics.
But I do think
that shit at the door.
I do think a lot of creators that are maybe centered in like their identity and who they are, and they're just focused on the art. That's something that I talk about a lot is just like focusing on the art and don't worry about the other stuff. That's really challenging. That's really hard to do, because
it's super hard. And the same thing exists in music. Like if you're a practitioner, an earnest, on fire, passionate practitioner of any art form, there's something fundamental about the universe that you understand, and the understanding is you are what you do. You're not your job necessarily, but you are what you do. Are you a good person? Well, it depends. Do you do good things that help other people? And if they don't help other people, are your intentions good? Are you trying? Because that counts too.
Right.
So artists who are making art, and especially artists who've been doing it for a while and kind of know what they're trying to do, are bulletproof. Because if you make a thing that you believe in, you're bulletproof. You're doing it. You're doing you, and when you're doing you, you don't have time for the people who aren't.
Right.
And you do have a lot of grace and respect for the people who are really trying. We'll both go to a Comic-Con, we'll both go to the artist alley, and we'll see somebody's black and white hand stapled piece of shit, just absolute garbage comic. And at the end of the day, it's like, you're a member of the club.
Yeah.
You pulled out your pencil, you pulled out your pen, you gave it everything you had. And maybe you're just new at this, and that's fine. Everybody was. My first stuff was absolute. I still have copies of my first garbage. It was terrible. Everybody's terrible when they start, unless they're freaking, what's his name, Frank Frazetta.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you're in the club. And that's something else that I love about comics people, is if you've got the badge that says Artist Alley, then everybody knows you put your money where your mouth is. You made a thing, you dropped the money, and you're here and you're doing it. And something I noticed, like all of my indie comics heroes, I'd meet them and they'd see Artist Alley badge and they'd give me the time of day. And then after they saw me 3 or 4 years in a row, like I was in the club. Something weird happened where I'd say, hey, how's it going? Doing fine. How's your show going? It's going all right. I think I'm gonna come out with some good numbers. And then after year 4, they're giving me, I say, how's it going? They're giving me dollar amounts.
Right.
They're telling me. They're like, I'm pretty sure that if I can close, like Friday was all right. If I can close a good Saturday, I'm making my mortgage payment this month. And I've got such and such a show after this. And so that'll be the rest of my bills. Like they're giving me that information. Like I had one creator drink with me, get schlocked, and just hold me with both arms and say, I'm having just the worst year. My wife and I, we can live like this, but my daughter didn't ask for this. I don't know what to do. Like, oh God. Like, oh, you're one of my heroes. You're one of my heroes who's been doing this since 1990. Oh, there's no hope for me. Oh no. Music is the same way. The more musicians I run into, it's very, very much game recognized game. It's like, no, you make music. That's the thing you care about.
Yeah.
So all the other particulars are not there.
On the subject of, you are what you do.
Yeah.
I know you've had a YouTube channel, like you make videos, and
yes.
You've relatively recently started a new website.
I opened the new website just this past year, and I'm slowly populating it with all of my backlog of comics.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, just tell me a little bit about the website. Like, how did you come to that?
2016 was not the worst year of my life, but it's in my top 3.
Okay.
And like the worst year was fourth grade, where the way that you were accepted by the classroom is by ripping on me specifically. And
so I would have been like really popular.
Yeah, including the teacher.
Oh no.
Yeah. And then going from there to home, where it's the same story again.
Yeah, because the older brothers, yeah.
Yeah, and I won't get in. And like, if my dad is pissed off enough and he decides that I'm the one at fault, the belt comes off. So that's the home life and school life. That was the worst year of my life. And 2016 was close to that.
Okay.
I tried, because like money was super tight. Like, somebody said to me, my daughter didn't ask for this and I don't know what I'm going to do. 2015 was the year that shit was tight. I had holes in all of my shoes, and so did my child, and we had enough money to buy new shoes for one of us. And I was in my 30s and eating ramen noodles every day. Save money. You're not supposed to be in your 30s eating no ramen noodles.
I like ramen noodles.
So I mean, there's a difference between oh, it reminds me of my college days, and I'm so broke. Like, that's shame eating.
I'd make a mean ramen noodle stew. I'm just saying, I'm throwing that out there.
I'm sure that all the things you make are very mean.
They're very mean. You're right.
So 2016, like all through 2015, I made a list of all the things I'm going to try to get my shit off the ground. And 2016 is the year I tried all of them, and I spent my bottom dollar, and I met with so many personal failures. Like, every single thing I tried failed catastrophically. So I'm driving home from Charlotte from a convention of the children's SCBWI. What is that? Society of children's writers and illustrators, that thing.
Yeah.
I spent my bottom dollar to go to that convention in Charlotte, because like they say, there's supposed to be art buyers there who hire out illustrators. So I came with all of my promo gear and spent every dime I had. Like that was the last thing I tried that year. And it was so fun fact for people at home, I'm colorblind. And I have 100% lost jobs. Like, when I first went into comics, there's a penciler, an inker, a colorist, a letterer. So being colorblind is not a big deal. It was also during a time where black and white indies were plenty viable. And that shit changed overnight, or so it felt.
I mean, even among my own books, like, that has been a thing where it's like, if I'm making out the financial plan, I'm like, okay, this is how much money I'm going to spend, this is how much money I'm going to pay per page. If the artist is like, hey, I can color it, and I just want a little bit more per page rate versus hiring a colorist, like, that's that's a no-brainer if you're writing the paycheck. But then what that comes down to is then everybody starts expecting that, of like, I just want an artist that can do it all. And it's like, I'm going to pay you for doing the work of 3 people. Penciler, inker, and colorist.
And I mean, forgetting that the time.
Right. The time doesn't matter.
It's like, it's still 72 hours of work squeezed into 24.
You want that extra $10 a day? You do it.
and man, I did. So like, fun fact, like, there's lots of comics jobs that when you sit down and actually calculate hours, I did some jobs for $1.50 an hour.
Yeah.
And eating ramen every day. And it's the damnedest of all things. Like every so often a month would come up, or my wife would come to me and be like, we're in a little bit of trouble. Can you help me with this or that bill? And for those curious, my wife is a nurse. She has a pretty good job, but you know, we're a young couple with a child getting started. Shit's tight.
Yeah.
And so suddenly you realize that $1.50 an hour job is literally paying that one bill. So you're going to keep taking those.
Yeah, right.
And then dealing with all of the emotional baggage of that. So I'm coming home from that convention where the only art buyer who showed up, I showed him my stuff clandestinely because they charge a fee for that, which, fun fact, anyone who charges you a fee to look at your portfolio is a scam.
Yeah.
That's a scam. Don't do it. Never pay somebody to look at your portfolio ever. It's a scam. Walk away. On the down low, because this art buyer knew it was a scam, he looked at my portfolio and he's like, your colors are ridiculous. It's like you pulled the blue crayon out and sky blue. It says, well, I'm colorblind, so what color is the freaking sky, man? And his eyes got huge as dinner plates and says, look, I don't know what to tell you. I don't have work for you. I don't know anybody who does. I don't know what you can do. I'm sorry. And hands my portfolio back. And that's the end of 2016. So on the car ride, I compose myself enough to call my wife and be like, hey, baby, I'm coming home. No, it didn't go very well. We're going to have a long talk as to what our next move is when I get home. I think I'm going to change the fake company name on all of my comics to Coffee and Hate, because that's all I have left. So she got promoted. Money stopped being a problem, not overnight, but fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And so the attitude completely changed. All of my stuff became made with Coffee and Hate. And she's just like, just do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Just make all the stuff you're going to make.
Well, how lucky for you, huh?
Yeah, no, super. So lucky, but at the same time, it's also, you know, I'm in my 30s and nothing I've tried has ever worked.
Oh, I'm well aware.
That's the trade-off. Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Another reason why comic makers in our age group, it's like, nah, they know.
Yeah, they know.
Yeah. So the website that I built, it's called Coffee and Hate. You can find it at coffeeandhate.biz, and it's a .biz because it's all just keeping in line with the I don't care anymore. I listened to everybody's advice. I talked to the comics old timers. I talked to business gurus. I listened to every comics business podcast. I listened to everything I could about marketing and sales. And I read the right magazines and I did all the stuff and I followed all the advice. And I went to this convention with this art buyer, and some of the advice is, don't confuse art directors. Have one style that you cultivate it as best you can and sell that. And then I had this art buyer, this art director, be like, I don't know why you artists like are just so rigid and insistent on your one style that you make. And me and my comic buddy who happened to be there just kind of look at each other like this.
No.
Yeah, we do that because assholes like you told us to, and I absolutely said those words.
Oh
no, I was beyond caring.
It's like, yeah, because
dicks like you keep telling us that art directors don't want to see multiple styles. So just the takeaway that all of the business suggestions are wrong. And all of my websites went defunct. My old webcomic was gone. My portfolio website, I stopped making the payments. Nobody's hiring me. I'm done. So I have all of these comics that I made, some of which I'm still super proud of, like Off-Panel Hero. Like you can see that the art is raw and somebody's still learning, but there's something there that I'm still proud of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I made coffeeandhate.biz just to house all of the comics that I've made so far in just a super easy to read method, not the abandoning the what is now the traditional web comic model where it's click next. You know, here's the button for next, here's the button for latest, here's the button for first, here's the button for archive, the blog is beneath it.
rejecting webtoons and Tapastic completely. Screw those guys. There's some great comics to be found on them,
right?
And if you find some, good for you. And if you put your comic on there and you find some success, then double good for you. I'm just so happy. That stuff was not working out for me, and I don't feel like dealing with somebody else's platform anymore. So coffeeandhate.biz, that's my current website, where right now I'm slowly putting all of the comics I've ever made there. All the comics, all the kids' books. And I made a video series several years ago called Finding Your Voice, which people who are looking for voice lessons kept finding.
I get it.
Yeah. So I changed the name to Art and Coffee. And it's a video series dedicated to helping you find, this is the actual tagline, helping you find and forge your own unique voice in visual storytelling. And I somewhere along the line, about 2014 is when I started teaching cartooning classes to kids, adolescents, and adults.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's continued. Like, so I'm teaching classes, and I noticed that the artists and aspiring artists who were finding my video series were mostly kids in the age that I taught. And it was great for me as a grown-up, because when you've been doing a thing for 10 years or more, you kind of forget how to be a beginner.
Yeah.
And so so the young kids are like hitting me with, here's what I'm worried about now. Here's what I'm worried about now. And while I may not have a whole lot of professional success, I do, I've been around, I know a thing or two, and I've talked to and spoken to at length with the people who did find success.
Right.
So I've got their stories.
Tertiary knowledge.
Yeah. So my kids would come to me with, I've got this problem and I don't know how to solve it. And I'm like, oh, I know how to solve that. And I'll tell the kid, make some notes, and then record some time lapse of me drawing a thing, and just record a voiceover of, here's something that I hear a lot. Here's how it is, and here's how to get through it. Things like something I'll hear a lot at Comic-Cons is, yeah, I used to draw. And something else that I hear a lot is like, I want to make comics, but I'm already in my 40s and I don't know. I feel like it's too late. And it is not too late. It's super intimidating when you see teenagers, super gifted teenagers and kids in their 20s killing it art-wise, and you're still learning your fundamentals. But it's not too late. Lots of people do this later in life and are much more successful than me.
Yeah.
And if you're older, you have an advantage. You've got so much more discipline and focus than the younger kids do.
Yeah.
So just stuff like that, or like when you're the kid in the art class who wants to make comics, nobody likes you. And except for like the other two closeted comics people.
Yeah.
But every single art teacher I had either was indifferent to me or fucking hated with like capital H, just hated me and all the other kids in the classroom. Sometimes whether it was because we were into comics, which they weren't, or just I had so many art teachers who just hated us for our youth.
See, I was very fortunate at my school. My art teacher was like a ultra nerd. Like, he was the type of guy that would go to Renaissance fairs and he read manga. Like, he was the guy that had like 80s manga. And he introduced me to a lot. Like, he just thought it was so cool that
one of the OG ElfQuest readers.
Right. And he thought it was and he thought it was so cool that he had students that were interested in that. So like I first read Battle Angel Alita, like from his old copies. He like lent me, which is like, I remember reading that and being like, a teacher gave me this? Like, what the WTF? Like, this isn't normal, Conversely, my English teacher was the old prude who didn't, she just wanted to read old literature and talk about Christ-like imagery over and over again, and just
yes,
exactly, yeah. So
speaking as a churchgoer, I'm officially done hearing about Christ-like anything. Right,
which is why I was probably more my life path led me down into art and comics and stuff, because my art teacher was cool, and I eventually found my way into writing because that's what I'm interested in, but it took me a while to get there because like I was so turned off by
I know.
like,
and
teachers.
Like, the thing that keeps happening is like I know so many other kids have that same experience because so many failed artists who become art teachers, who become art teachers out of bitterness and desperation because there's nothing else. So like so many of the kids that I teach, their parents, like it's an after school thing. It's an after school thing, it's a community arts thing, or it's a private lessons thing. And most of these parents are coming from the perspective of my son or my daughter is really interested in comics and animation, and they're being actively discouraged at school. And so the number one thing, like it took a couple of years to realize this, but the number one thing that I was providing was here's an adult who understands and is giving you the time of day. And so just hearing that story over and over from my kids, I'm like, oh, that's still happening. Let me get on my video series and be that adult for as many people as I can. Hey, it happened to me too. It's all right. Here's where it's coming from. And for God's sakes, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. Your teachers are going through a lot of things that are awful that you may not understand, and it's not your fault.
They're people too.
And you know what? It's jarring, especially for kids to realize that some adults are just dicks.
It is. And it is like, I think it's also kind of a universal experience that a lot of people have when you're a kid and then you're coming into adulthood. And then at some point you're like, oh, some of these adults that like previously had authority or just were in your life in some way, and you're just like, oh, they're just huge jerks and they don't know what's going on. And they
so to sum up and answer your question, coffeeandhate.biz, the new website that I built this year, exists to house all the comics that I've made so far. And also I can't, my wife and I, God bless her, we had a conversation when I first made comics, and I said, and here's a list of signifiers that I'm gaining traction. And if I can achieve 3 items on this list in 10 years, then we know that comics is working and I'll keep going. And if in 10 years I don't have 3 items from this list, that means I'm going to stop and I'm going to do something else. 2018, 19, 20, somewhere in there. That was the 10-year mark.
Right. Yeah.
And I sat down with my wife and said, I don't have anything on this list that I made 10 years ago. So, you know, this is our life way in, and God bless her, my beautiful wife. She's like, I like your comics. I love having watched you improve over these 10 years. I love watching you teach the kids. Like, I want you to keep making it, which thank God, because as you know, Aaron, and as every other, as Stan Lee would call us, as every other true believer knows, you can't stop. You can't stop.
No, that's true.
I know some comics old timers who know they need to quit and do something else, and they cannot, because the art form itself has so much potential and is so powerful and is so compelling from both ends. So Coffee and Hate is also just a place for me to just put any other thing that I make, any other comic I make. It's like, here you go. Because this past February and March, during the pandemic, I dropped 3 more kids books. I took a break from Purgatory Pub. I took that year, and I paid down what's called idea debt, some stuff that's been swirling around forever. Finally wrote it out, made 3 kids books that I'm extremely proud of. I think are really funny and really cute, and then I think are my best work yet. And I went through the process, that agonizing process of trying to get an agent or a publisher and reading what everyone in the industry is looking for right now. And it's soul crushing to read how nobody wants you. That's over and over again.
That's the frustrating life of pitching.
I'll get somebody who says, I'm looking for serious literature that just happens to be for kids, which is not what I make. I'm Captain Funny, cuddly kind of. Like I'm one of my kids' books is called Argvarg Throws a Tea Party, and it is about a Conan style barbarian who is pledged to protect a 3-year-old princess girl, and to be equal to any task that she sets in front of him. And her first task is, I want to have a tea party. So this barbarian guy runs back to his wise old master, says, she asked for a tea party. I don't know how to do that. And I can't fail her. And the master says, you know what? I don't know how to do that either. And so they go to a public library and read all the books about tea and etiquette. And Argvarg marches back to that castle in all of his Conan the Barbarian splendor and says, Princess, do you still want a tea party? Let's do it. I've got some hibiscus tea, and I've got some chamomile, and here's how you brew it, and here's how you steep. We need to make invitations for our guests. Like, that's where I live.
Yeah.
And I have another one where a monster comes out of the water and starts. This one's on the website right now, and you can read it. It's called The City Town Crisis in City Town. A giant monster comes out of the water and starts smashing up a city, and I fit as many jokes as I can until twist ending. And it's essentially just my love letter to the Powerpuff Girls and to Dexter's Lab.
Classics.
And to all the people who made those. So I'm not serious literature guy to help kids get through hard times. I'm funny guy to help kids get through hard times.
One of the things that I wanted to talk to the reason I wanted to talk to you about your website and your YouTube channel and just your history of working in comics is in many ways I feel like it's not that unique of a story, and that's not meant to be an insult, but I think you know what I mean.
You're exactly right. It's a pretty common story,
and it's
you and I have met enough people, each other,
right?
If no one else, you know.
And it's really common to myself, and it was just really serendipitous, or at least coincidental, that I saw you had started the new website. You'd been doing these YouTube videos, and you I don't know how regularly you're doing like an email newsletter, but I know I've gotten a few from you.
It's supposed to be once a month, but I'm not good at it.
I'm trying to do a weekly newsletter, and I don't have a lot to say to everybody other than, hey, here's the podcast. Still working on comics, but nothing I can show you, you know?
Yeah. Isn't that not the worst? And then the video series is supposed to be every week, but like I used to have kids every week, and now I don't. So I'm like, I'm not sure what to talk about. What do the kids want to hear?
Right.
But that's weird to make that statement unironically.
Right. And so it struck me. Like, I thought it was interesting that because I think we also are in a similar timeline of just like similar age, similar time getting into comics, similar time of trying to make a go of it on some level, you know. And we've both arrived at kind of the same space where I had my old self-publishing name, which was New Haven Comics.
I remember.
And last year I started my new one, which is called Second Thought Comics, which is a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke of like, everybody after trying to do comic books seriously for 10 years, they all have that moment where they go, on second thought, maybe I should just go work at Target or something.
Yeah, it's like maybe I should do something that isn't wasting my life.
Right.
Meanwhile, you and me also, like my first one was Firelights Media, because I thought it sounded cool.
It sounds cool.
Then, and just like you, I'm like, fucking coffee and hate.
Yeah.
My tongue in cheek, it's like, nah, I'm joking, but not really. There's a lot of very ugly anger behind this guy.
Right.
There's a lot of ugly anger behind the barbarian throwing a tea party. I think the conclusion that you and I came to is like other people, they say on second thought, and you and me are like, I can't.
Right.
I can't walk away.
Yeah, I'm doing it. You know,
this is it. This is where, and just like adjusting. Hitting that second stride and adjusting the attitude of just I'm doing it. I can't not do it. I'm going to make the most of it, and it's going to be fine. And
well, I think it's a good.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I also think it's a good. It's kind of a good marker in somebody's, like, not their career as like a creator, but like their artistic fulfillment path. their creative path of just like, you really do kind of got to get to that point. I've talked about this before on the podcast with other artists where you sort of like shed that ego of what dreams you think are going to happen. And there's that little bit of like cynical reality balanced with just like on a personal level, what you want to do. Like you really are forced to confront yourself and be like artistically, like what I want to do and how am I going to make that happen, as opposed to just, here's how to get famous, or here's how to whatever. And I do think that they're kind of two different paths. And there's a lot of people that are at that same point where we are in their artistic careers, where you kind of, I guess it is a little bit of like facing reality or just like, coming to terms, because like no matter how you approach it or what your goal is, if you're getting involved in the arts, you're still playing the lottery, no matter, because like I was in this game not to get big and famous. I was not in this game to be the next Todd McFarlane. I was in this game to be just a working cartoonist, right?
Back in the day, I wanted to be Doug TeNapel, because at the time Doug TeNapel was just making his making a black and white indie graphic novel that was fun, all ages, and I didn't have any of the baggage of knowing any of his politics
or just anything about him in general.
I tell you what, though, he was a great lesson, because when he started posting some political stuff, it's like, oh, I get that, I see that, wait, hold on, that's a little bit weird, and then it got further and further off the rails, right? And what I got from that was, and like, he's not the first, you and I have seen several creators do that. Orson Scott Card, God bless him,
oh my goodness, he was one of the earliest.
At one point, he was this super sensitive, open, thoughtful guy, and then something happened and he became a crazy person. Like I will plant both of my feet in, like, he's not racist, he's not phobic, he's not this, he's not that, he's a crazy person. He's a little bit out of his mind.
Do you ever worry that you're going to turn into an old crazy person?
I'm a little worried. Like, I'm
but
not
that should only bother you if you
unironically 100%. I'm a little worried because I've seen it happen to so many people.
It's like so many people. Yeah.
My dad was my dad grew up in southern middle of nowhere poverty, and put himself through school and became he was one of the computer technicians playing nuclear war games at NORAD.
Okay.
During Vietnam. It's a big deal. And he also got a career at IBM in the 70s when computers were right about to rocket, he was this thoughtful, smart, well-read guy. And then by the time I was born, like, there's so many times in our lives together where I'm like, when did you become an idiot? And I feel I'm worried that that's coming for me.
Yeah.
And also I think about like Doug TeNapel, his books, like his actual output made a lot of people really happy and put a lot of very beautiful things into the world. And it wasn't impersonal. Like, a lot of his self is in it, and it's good and it's lovely. And I encourage everybody to read it. And then you find out just anything he says to anybody. It doesn't matter what your socio-political leaning is at all. Like, even I do not, but even if I agreed with this guy completely, I'm still just like, come on, man, what are you doing? This is beneath you. You don't have time for this. You got comics to make. Like, that was a little unnecessarily mean. You went out of your way for that one.
I do think that there's not to cut you off, but I'm going
not at all.
I do think that this is like, Twitter has like messed up a lot of people, and I do think that there are a lot of artists that benefit from just putting their voice into their art and not putting their voice literally out there. And I will go so far as to say that this is a phenomenon that has been recognized before Twitter became a thing.
Nothing's new. The speed is new. That's it.
Right. Exactly. There's always that age-old story of like the artist who everybody considers as the genius, and then they like give an interview and they just say nonsense, and you're just like, wait, this is the person that created that? Like, this is not the year 2017 wasn't the first year that happened. Like that's been happening for a long time, where there's a lot of artists that kind of get put on a pedestal because they created something that people reacted to. And then you get the artist just saying a bunch of literal stuff verbatim. And a lot of it might even just be like word salad or incomprehensible nonsense. And you're just, there's a sense of like, is this person a genius or are they just like crazy or, you don't know. Yeah. And it sort of ruins the mystique, which also I think is another problem that artists have, which is trying to be a little too introverted, where you're too afraid to ruin the mystique and you don't, you just want to put the art out. And I don't know. Here's me rambling, but I do think
I love every second of it.
I do think it's a problem that a lot of artists have. It's certainly something I struggle with, which is like, I just want to do the art. Like, I don't want to have to like make blog posts with like a clickbait headline of this is what I think, this is what I believe. Now go buy my book to confirm your beliefs if you also believe that. I want to make something that moves people and that they can discuss. And it's not that I don't have my points of view, but
but like there's time and place. And also like something else that you and I have in common is we like to be funny. We want to make something and it's not weaponized humor.
Yeah.
It's much like The Tick. It's like, I'm not taking the piss out of anybody. I'm having a good time. And I'm inviting you to come with me. I want you to have a good time. And that's, so the two things that I fear is one, the idiot bug or the idiot monster that seems to come for so many of us.
When you reach a certain age,
Yeah. And I'm just scared to death.
Because that's not just an artist thing. See that play out as like a generational thing. All the old boomers on Facebook.
I've got some older relatives who have been solid from cradle to grave, and so I know it's possible, and God willing, I'll be one of them. So I'm afraid of the idiot bug. I'm afraid I'm gonna fall off the rails, become a crazy person, and in so doing, turn people off who could have otherwise shared in a good time. And the other thing that I'm afraid of is misspeaking or being misrepresented. Like in our time together just tonight, I'm rambly, I'm weird, I'm not always on target, and I'm damn sure not succinct and eloquent. Not unless I can. Not like writing is so much fun for me because what comes out writing wise, it's like, this is what I'd be like if I could think before I speak.
Right. Yeah. It's the same thing with me. I always feel like when I'm speaking, like even when I'm podcasting, I say there's a lot of ums and uhs. And I do that thing where I'm like, it's sort of like hesitate trying to think of the thing that I'm referring to, which I've done several times tonight, probably. Whereas like if you're writing,
not really that many.
Well, that's because you didn't allow me the time to speak or try to think of things to say.
I'm sorry.
Look, there's
but meanwhile, when you're writing,
yes, when you're writing, you have that editing process where you can trim it all down and make it perfect. And it's sort of like this ideal, this is what I think everybody should talk like, but at the very least, it's what I wish I talked like all the time,
right. And the avenues for us as artists to speak to or try to gain an audience is stuff like Twitter. And like I quit Twitter in 2017 and turned it off because it's call it what it is. It's post-Trump. Everybody's got an opinion, and I don't care where you are politically. Objectively, things were batshit. Things were batshit in a way that they hadn't been before overnight. It was simmering beneath the surface for a long time.
It's been there the whole time, but it all exploded. Yeah.
So like everybody else on God's green earth, I am on social media talking politics because it's like shit's not allowed to be this crazy. It's kind of obvious that it's not supposed to, yada yada. And Twitter is set up to be this. I'm trying to say this and that. And Twitter's only giving you this.
Right, yeah.
And they're making sure that people only interact with this. So my and that is missed.
And so I'm instantly, by just the nature of the beast and by human nature, I'm already being misrepresented. And it's not even because I said the wrong thing yet. It's because the machine is only accepting the first half of a statement.
Yeah.
And so I'm find myself getting tweeted by angry people who are angry with me, who agreed with me politically. Like, they're angry with me about politics, except we were on the same side. So I'm like, clearly this isn't working.
Yeah.
And I had the best of intentions, and I have what I think are pretty uncontroversial
incontrovertible.
Thank you. Not controversial. like simple stuff. Racism is bad. There is a difference between this protest over here, where the riot police came out and things got violent and a lot of improvised nonsense happened, and this thing here where they're shouting Nazi slogans and showing up armed. Like, those things are different. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to look at those two things the same. Mm-hmm. And that's not a controversial statement. Like, that is the most tame possible thing that I could say in regards to any of that. But the nature of things like Twitter is you're only getting half, and you're getting the half that Twitter wants you to see, because it's the half that makes you engage, and the half that makes you engage is the half that makes you angry. So I'm also like just worried about misrepresenting myself or being misrepresented by transmitting to people.
Right. Yeah.
And so you. Yeah,
I have the same issue, which is why for me it's easier to just not engage. But then that has that downside of like, well, now nobody knows that I'm doing anything,
and now nobody knows or cares. Yeah,
exactly.
And my video series, I learned a lot from my video series. Like, going back to, you and I are kind of in the same place, because the first time I started it, let it drop on hiatus for a long time, and started it back up. The first time was just, I need clicks. I need clicks. I need name recognition. I'm going to make this thing, and hopefully it'll garner an audience.
Yeah.
And then I stopped because it wasn't working, and other things got in the way. And one of those other things was actually just sitting down and making the comic. And then a few years went by. You get older, you get wiser, and especially having a kid, and she hits a certain age where the interaction is much more involved and nuanced.
Yeah.
And years where I'm doing school visits, where I'm teaching kids, where I'm teaching high school kids, I'm teaching some adults, and just getting better at talking to people and understanding kind of what they want or need from me. Which the best way I could describe it is being art dad.
Yeah.
For most of my younger kids, like the grade school to elementary school kids, they're looking for art dad. High school kids are still kind of looking for that, but not as much. And adults are just looking for another adult to say, you're not silly, this isn't stupid, give it a shot, you have a chance. So the video series, when I started it back up, the focus changed. It's like, I've met a lot of kids who need art dad. I can be art dad. And while I've been making the series, I've been thinking really, really hard about Mr. Rogers, of all people.
He was great. He was one in a million.
He was a master of what he did in capital letters, and I'm only now in my life understanding that. And I don't like talking about religion or speaking religiously, so I ask for forgiveness. But like, Mr. Rogers, his whole show, he's a Presbyterian minister. His show was his ministry. He mentioned Jesus 0 times. He mentioned God 0 times. He talked about religion 0 times. And that kind of example is the example that people have been putting in front of me my whole life. So like, and just the more I think about, the older I get, the more I see kids, the more I think about the world, the more I meet other parents. And again, I live in a time and a place where like things are pretty diverse. Like I'm you know, my daughter wants to go play at this kid's house. The kid happens to be black, or you know, she has this friend whose mom is Hispanic and doesn't speak English. And I have to be very sad with my broken ass Spanish. So just
good memento, poor favor.
Yeah. Meeting these people and getting older and wiser and thinking real hard about Mr. Rogers and what he did, and like the philosophical crux of what Christianity is supposed to be. Your job is not to judge anybody, your job is to love everybody. The pertinent question is how. What's the best way to do it? And if I could throw a little suggestion in there, a little thing that I learned, usually the best way is by being nice, just by being kind. You know, not necessarily soft spoken. You can be boisterous about it, but the name of the game is just be nice and give everybody a chance.
Yeah.
And so on my video series, like I'm so scared of being misrepresented, and on my video series I've got 20 or 30 minutes to say all the things. And every time I do, I get rid of my fears of saying the wrong thing or being misrepresented by saying I'm talking to one of my kids, or I'm talking to one of my kids' parents, because like a lot of art kid parents are really worried when their kids are artsy.
For justifiable reasons.
Yeah. And if I'm on any other platform that I'm not building myself, then all of the safety guards for me saying the wrong thing or being misrepresented just become huge.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to navigate those waters.
I
very well. So yeah,
I've come to that realization. I came to that realization quite a while back, of just not specifically in terms of like religious ministry, although it obviously applies, but I think it extends to other aspects of just the whole concept of proselytizing. It's like a double-edged sword, because there's that thing of like, okay, you want to get out there and you want to you have ideas, you want to spread them, you want to get people, you know, tuned into whatever you're doing, and there's always that thing that's going to turn people off if you're too intense. Like I'm sure, you know, you've been around people that are really trying to proselytize to you, and it's just the biggest turnoff in the world, even if they're people that know you're already on their side, and you're just like,
that's what's even more infuriating. It's like, come on, man, I'm already here.
Right.
And if we're being completely real with ourselves, I've been that guy on so many occasions, which is the other fear. It's like, I've said some dumbass shit in my life.
And I do think that the like the epiphany kind of comes from this concept of people really just react to authenticity. And you know, to put it simply, like if you just live a good life, you're going to influence people, just be a good person. And you know, obviously I'm speaking in a little bit of abstract terms, like
no,
good
I get
is,
it.
you know, you're going to define good, like how you think should be good, but people are going to look to you and be like, that guy's happy with, you know, what he's doing and who he is. How do I have that? And then they're going to come to you. And whenever you have somebody coming to you, that's a receptive audience, and they're going to be more open to what you're saying versus, you know, trying to get in somebody's face and like forcibly convert them. And obviously what I'm saying sounds like it's specifically about religion, but I actually think it applies to all aspects.
See, I'm looking, I'm hearing all of that from the lens of specifically comics and making art. You want to spread
that's
your
how I'm
ideas.
thinking about it. Yeah.
Especially, and like you and me, a lot of our ideas are essentially just jokes. You want to spread your jokes. You want to spread the funny. This is fun. Come have fun with me.
Yeah.
And that is, I think it's pretty uncontroversial to say that is a universal good, to spread just fun.
Yeah.
And like something else I've noticed is that neither of us, our fun is not especially exploitative. Like we're not taking fun with barbs at somebody.
Yeah.
Which I think is, you know, makes it an even more universal good that you're trying to spread. And I think you're right. Like the authenticity thing, because much like where we're at in our life, it's you know, if you say on second thought, maybe I should do something else. Another one bites the dust. It's like, you know, you were pulling an oar with the rest of us for a while, and it was good to have you. But there's also just this tiny little tinge of the rest of us who are still rowing. It's like we're the real deal. We're the real folk blues. All of the chips are down, and we're still here.
Yeah.
And just, you know, there's not. I don't know personally. I don't know a whole lot of people like you and me in comics, but just the handful that I do know, just salt of the earth. You just want to hold on to them with both hands, like anybody, because you know, I didn't interpret you as waxing religious, because it's devoting yourself to an art the way that we are is a quasi-religious thing to do. You and I are doing something.
Its own way,
we are doing a thing that we believe in, and in abstract terms, it's just, there's a thing, we believe in it, it's in us in a way that we cannot get rid of. And so we're doing the thing, and trying to spread the thing,
right? And
excuse me,
that's no problem. And I think you mentioned, or like you pointed out, we are both kind of in that unique position where I think people that are further along in their path, they have either found like an acceptable version of success one way or the other. Like they've got it, however that looks, because it can manifest itself in different ways. Like you've got a small but dedicated following, or you've got just a career job working somewhere, you know, maybe
you're one of the webcomic guys. Maybe you're one of the, like, maybe you're Hickman and you got picked up by Hollywood.
Right. You just got that, you know, and then there's
Hickman, Kirkman, there's more.
Kirkman or Hickman. I think Kirkman is I put out the clip from the episode that I did with Chris McJunkin, which is the question mark. The question is Robert Kirkman the most fortunate comic book writer to ever live? And I would actually probably say yes, in terms of, but we don't have to dwell on that. But I spoke on that at length with Chris McJunkin. And,
I haven't heard that whole episode, but I look forward to listening to that.
Yeah, well,
I was so happy to see that you had an episode with McJunkin. Like, because anytime I see him, we're at a con. We don't have enough time to get really into it.
Casual and chat.
And I haven't done a con in years, so I haven't even had a chance to see the guy. So like your episode with him was just, it just made me so happy.
That's something that motivated the creation of this podcast, which was, it had been over a year. I mean, like all the smart people, like when 2020 happened, and I feel like I don't have to explain what that means, but like somewhere around, let's say May of 2020, by the time like everything had kind of set in and everybody knew what was going on, all the smart people were like, I'm going to do social media, podcasts, work from home, like all this stuff. For me, it was like March of 2021. After a year of doing nothing, I was like, I should get off my butt. And, I've got all these friends that I used to communicate with regularly, either at comic book conventions or just online talking about doing whatever. And because of this year just being a giant black hole, I haven't seen these people in a long time. So let's do the podcast and just kind of catch up and chat with people about, as I said, talking shop, talking about art, talking about whatever. But that is a question that comes up is, has the last year been more productive or less productive for you? Like, has your life changed in any ways with the quarantine?
Well, there's a joke going around with all these other comics people. It's like, oh, there's a quarantine. I didn't notice.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I don't leave my house outside of the grocery store anyway.
That's the old introverted artist joke. Oh, I just stay home for 15 hours and then draw all day, do nothing, and then sleep and then see no one.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Oh, you mean you people are just now wearing PJs all day, every day? You're just now realizing that that's not actually the dream. Yeah.
Right.
So it was a super productive year for me. Like the first 8 weeks before any shit really hit the fan and nobody knew if this was actually a big deal.
Yeah.
It was Christmas. Like in addition to liking my wife, this is where I brag. In addition to liking my wife, I like my daughter. She's cool. So like here in North Carolina, we have something called year-round school where you don't get a big long summer vacation. You like have a grade period and then you've got some weeks and then a grade period and some weeks. And it's called track out. And so I was doing a thing at my daughter's school. I was volunteering and they were talking about, it was a Friday. They were talking about how the kids might not be coming back on Monday. And track out's like 4 weeks away. And I'm over here thinking, it's like, man, I kind of wish you would track out now. So the first 8 weeks, it's like tons of family time. I have my daughter and I got all of the house chores that I'd been putting off for years taken care of. Like all of my books are in my garage sitting on a pallet and it's just a thumb. It's not a thumb. It's just a big wad of garbage in the middle of my garage, which is also where I play drums and work out and build things out of wood. And we don't actually put a car in there. So like I kept threatening to build these big tough shelves for all of my books and I never did. So I built the shelves. I cleaned the whole garage. I took my drums completely apart, unscrewed every single thing, cleaned and polished every single thing, which I've had. I did that for 3 different drum sets, which is what I'm playing on. And one of them I've had for literally half my life and it never got that cleaning. So like got all those chores out of the way. And then when those are out of the way, Purgatory Pub book 3, which is I had handy. I was this close to being smooth. Purgatory Pub book 3 out of 4. Like just arrived in the mail in just enough time for me to put onto the new shelves. So like I felt like I hit a milestone with this one, which is easily the best bit of comics I've done to date. So I had all these kids books ideas flailing in my head that I've had since Ivy was a tiny little girl, and she's still in grade school, but it's 5th grade. And I like want to read these to her class and have my last chance to be cool dad.
Right.
So 2020, I wrote and drew 3 different kids books that I'd been sitting on for years.
So when did you finish book 3 of Purgatory Pub?
I finished it late 2019.
Okay. And did you do the Kickstarter before or after it was finished?
After it was finished. Okay.
So you waited for the full book to be done.
Yeah, here for book 2, I only had 1 chapter left, and I figured I could finish it during the campaign. I could not. The last chapter ended up taking me a couple of months for reasons. And so people who are waiting on their books were waiting for a long time, and I felt awful. So for book 3, I'm going to be finished completely, and it's going to go. I get the money, I pass it to the printer, and then books out just as fast as I can.
Like,
get it.
Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
Step.
And I made sure
easy.
During the campaign, I made sure everybody knew the book is done. It's all done. The lettering, everything. You could read it now. All I have to do is click send on this file and the printer's got it. And I'm going to ship these out to you lickety split. And no, I'm not, because the post office is going to shut down with everything else.
I was going to say the timing was pretty bad. Yes.
Yeah. Like one poor guy, God bless him, one of my higher backers waited a solid year before he got his stuff. I owe that guy a huge favor that he should not have had to wait that long. And so just like it's the second book that took way too long, and I feel like such a schlub.
So you've got so book 3 finished. You did the Kickstarter. And then for most of 2020, you've been doing the like the kids book illustrations. Yeah, which also look basically like comics, like black and whites. Yeah, you've got them up on your website. Yeah, some of them at least. You can go to coffeeandhate.biz, or you can just look right here. Oh my gosh, look at that.
big barbarian takes a little girl to go picking flowers. And there's monsters and stuff.
Yeah.
And he defends little girl from monsters in just the most metal way possible that I could possibly think of. Which I'm reasonably certain is another reason why no kids book publisher will have me. And you know what? If I can't tear the heart out of a chicken hydra, then I don't want to be published.
That sounds like one of those things that's like admittedly, this might just be like I don't know, would you call it a generational thing? Where like, because like I grew up reading things on the internet, so I'm really desensitized, and I sort of just have this assumption, and forgive me if it's an unearned assumption, but just like agents and people in the industry are just naturally more cautious and they overthink the whole thing.
Absolutely. They're not risk averse, they're risk allergic.
Yes, exactly. So there's like
the tiniest bit of risk is to just
right. And whenever you're pitching to an agent or whenever you're pitching to a publisher, like the first thing is what popular thing is your book similar to? That's the hook of how can I sell this? Is it like this other thing that's really popular? Because that's really what I'm looking for,
Yeah.
And it's not to say that I don't understand that. Like it's do
super disheartening. Super disheartening to know how effective that is. Because like when Twilight was a big deal, but the books were all out, all the publishers were rushing to make more vampire teenage fantasy novels, and in my head I'm like, we already had Twilight. All of those readers are looking for the next thing, and I was wrong.
You were wrong
because like the year after Breaking Dawn went passé, just every bookstore was just flooded with more vampire teenage new adult, which is a brand new genre that they gave to it, and it sold gangbusters. Like I thought it's like they've already got Twilight, they want the next thing. What's the next thing? Which was Hunger Games. But no, they wanted Twilight again, just by somebody else, and publishers were like, yep, here you go, here's all your vampire stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just the frustrating aspect of pitching, which is why I think that this is probably something that I've personally struggled with. Like I kind of have that insecure punk rock attitude of just like reject them before they can reject you. Like I don't even give a fuck. I do, but I don't, but I do, but I don't, but I do.
Yeah.
It's that whole thing. Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
I sure do, because I struggled with that, because it's like, why would I submit to a publisher? Why?
Right.
So they could reject me and I'll be heartbroken. It's like my stuff doesn't belong with a publisher. My stuff's too cool for them, whatever.
Right.
Or
these are the little lies you tell yourself.
Yeah.
And then you see somebody getting successful doing the type of thing that you want to be doing, and you're just like, why them, not me?
Yeah. Yep, definitely fell into that trap. Definitely in my first 3 years of making comics. Like that's all it took to make me that bitter guy.
Yeah.
So I just swallowed all of my pride and arrogance and just, all right, how do I get published? Read all the stuff, did all the stuff. It was harrowing. The rejections aren't so bad. Like this is something, I'm not a generational warrior, but this is something that the old guard writers complain about, and guys our age and younger are like, what are you even angry about? Rejection by silence.
Yeah.
If you don't hear from us over the course of 6 months, that means we passed. If you send me the letter, even if it's a form letter, somebody just did me a quick little favor, don't wait on us anymore.
Yeah.
As opposed to wait on us until we don't talk to you.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely, I think it's a frustrating thing. And it's sort of like the new, in a way, it's like the new low that the industry can reach. Like you thought it couldn't get worse than Jack Kirby. And to be fair to him personally, maybe it couldn't. but just like as far as standards go, like
oh yeah,
I haven't made a ton of pitches. Like I'm not somebody who's like constantly throwing out pitches or whatever, but I've made a handful of pitches in my day, and I've received exactly one rejection, and the rest of it was just ignored. I will counterbalance that with saying I got one acceptance, so it's not.
Oh,
yeah, well, good. That was American Chop Suey that we have on GoComics.com. So, 2020 was a productive year for you. You did a lot of illustrations, got a lot of work done around the house,
right? And where we had left off was talking about like publishers and trying to get publishers,
right? Well, I want to break right there. I'm going to cut you off. Yeah, I want to talk about that because that was a similar path that I was on, where and I think this is important to talk about for like a lot of new creators to kind of hear this, like the trajectory. Whereas for the first several years, I was like, I'm going to make my own comics. I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to make my name for myself, just doing my thing. And then you kind of get into, I've made several things. I have not exactly like a robust bibliography, but you have credits.
You have a body of work.
You have a body of work. That's exactly the word that I'm looking for. You have a body of work, and you're like, okay, now it's time to start pitching. And it's like, I've got something to show for it. I'm not just some scrub who's like, I think, like this is like the thing that always happens to me at family gatherings when you see like some relative that you've never met before, and they're like, so I hear you like to make comic books. And I'm like, yeah, I self-publish stuff. And they go, have you ever thought about submitting to Marvel Comics? I think they make comic books. And you're just like, okay, I can't even have this conversation right now. Like, where to even begin?
You just told me that you're very nice and that we should never speak ever again.
Right. Like I don't even have a prepared response to that. And it's happened to me on multiple occasions. You would think by now I sort of like stumble around Marvel is like an entertainment industry, and it's really, they don't accept submissions. Like it's this whole thing.
I never have the energy to be snarky.
Right. Yeah.
Like, contrary to all the stuff about being uncontroversial and trying to be kind and loving people. Yeah, no, if I had the energy, I would just love to be snarky.
Yeah,
and just be like, no, I've never fucking heard of Marvel.
Oh, they make comic books, you say?
Yeah. So every time somebody characters, it's so frightening how universal that is. Have you thought about submitting to Marvel Comics? My answer is always, it's like, that sounds like a really good idea. I'm gonna
I'm gonna look into that.
I'm interested.
Yeah. Definitely giving me food for thought. Yeah. Well, brother,
which is a thing that happens.
I'm going to stop you right there. We've been going for over an hour and a half.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
You said you were going to keep me on the rails, and I was, and
I didn't do a good job. Final note: where can people find your stuff?
You can find me on Instagram at Gabe Dunston Draws. You can find me on YouTube, Gabe Dunston, or search for Art and Coffee or Gabe Dunston Art and Coffee. That's my series. I've taken a small hiatus, but I'm sitting down and discussing episodes with an artist friend of mine to fill in the gaps that my students would have left. So that series is about to start back up, and I plan to post mostly weekly. Cool. Last but not least, you can find me at coffeeandhate.biz, because .biz is so much more fun than .com. Just so much more fun. And slowly I'm putting every comic I've ever made there, and it's easy to read, no ads, nothing, like very, very simple. Just go click and scroll. You don't have to hit next on every page. Just scroll and you can read anything you want to read. And I've also got a blog there where I talk about the behind the scenes of how specific comics get made. So coffeeandhate.biz.
Hey everybody, Aaron Walther here, just reminding you that if you like this podcast, please subscribe to the channel. Also, head over to secondthoughtcomics.com to stay up to date on the various comics that I write. For a limited time, I'm giving away a free PDF of my latest graphic novel, The Amoral Stingray. All you have to do is sign up to the Second Thought Comics newsletter. Link is in the description. Thanks for reading.